Why is it so awkward to be a Christian today?
I think it's a really good question. It's awkward. It's awkward to be young. It's awkward to be an adult and be a Christian. It's awkward to, as the world kind of changes and moves in a different direction, they're moving in one spot and we're going to another spot. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm a huge Giants fan, big Giants fan, and I live in LA, which is not prone to be very welcoming to Giants fans, right? So when I go to Dodger Stadium to watch a Giants game, I'm rooting for somebody else, and they're rooting for somebody else. And so when the game is tense and it gets to the ninth inning and it's the last out, and we need a base hit, we need somebody to hit somebody in and score a run and win the game. It's tense, dude. I look at this guy looks at me, and we both know we're rooting for an opposite team. So it's awkward between the two of us. It's awkward because we're different, right? He's rooting for one team, and I'm rooting for the other team. Well, the same thing is true when we look at where our culture is going. Deep down inside of us, like, you have same interests as your friends do, you have the same hobbies that your friends do, but deep down at the core of who you are, you love something different than those around you who aren't followers of Christ. And because deep down inside of you, at the center of who you are, is a love for something else, it's going to be awkward. Because those moments, like in the ninth inning, when you got bases loaded and you need one hit, right? One hit to score a run in. Those tense moments, that's when the fanship, right, gets really awkward. When you root for one team and they root for another team. Same thing is true in your conversations with your friends or family that may disagree with you. Those tense moments, you can look at each other and know he's going to go in one direction, right? And I'm going to go in another direction. And so the reason it's awkward is because you're different. And at the core of who you are, the center of who you are, you love the Father, right? And they don't. And because they don't, there's just an awkwardness about that. And I think the important thing to remember as you're growing and as you're figuring out who you are and your self-esteem is building, your self-awareness is building, you can't let the difference defeat you. And there was a young guy in the Bible named Daniel. And Daniel was just like me. He went into a stadium that rooted for a different team, right? Daniel is taken captive by the Babylonians. He's put into a new place. And in Babylon, they like different things. They do different things. They love different things. They love to worship their king. Their king loves to be worshiped. Daniel's coming from a place where they worship God. So he gets into this land, and it starts to be really awkward. Right? And one time, Daniel was commanded, as was his friends, that they need to worship the king. So the king said, I'm building a statue. I'm going to put it out there. And when I strike up the band, I want you to bow down and you worship the statue because you worship me. Right? So it's like that ninth inning moment where the teams are different. And the same tension that's felt when I'm a Giants fan in a Dodger stadium is the same tension felt right there. The band strikes up. Everybody's bowing down. Well, what does Daniel and his friends do? Like, what are they going to do? There's that awkward, tense moment. And what Daniel and his friends do is they don't let their difference make them feel defeated. Right? I want to show this in Daniel chapter 3. What happens is not worshiping this. Now, if I'm in Dodger Stadium and I root for my team and they win, nobody's going to hurt me. Well, hopefully nobody's going to hurt me. Right? But in this case, the king said, if you don't worship my statue, then you're dead. Now, that's a little more awkward, right? That's scary, that's tense, there's terror involved in there. And so Daniel's and his friends find themselves in a land where their differences not only make it awkward, but make it really terrifying. And what they do is they don't let their differences make them feel defeated. And what happens is they go up to the king, and this is what it says in Daniel chapter 3, verse 16. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they got super weird names, right? They're already different. Answered the king and said, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. That's where he was going to throw them if they didn't worship. He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Realize what they just did there. They said, look, we're not going to worship, right? We're different. At the core of who we are, we love something different. And we're not going to bow at this awkward moment. We're not going to bow at this terrifying moment. And maybe God delivers us. Maybe he saves us. You throw us in the fire and we make it. Well, maybe God doesn't. Either way, we're going to obey. Right? So it is awkward to be a Christian, but we can't allow our differences to make us feel defeated, no matter what obedience costs us. Right? It's always important to obey, no matter what the consequences are. And that's what Daniel and his friends had, that kind of resolve. Now, God does deliver them. God does free them, right? And so God delivers them from that, and the people in Babylon see that, and the king kind of changes his mind a little bit. Now, we also need to see that we can't let our differences make us feel defeated when it comes to, is God still moving, right? As the American culture moves away from the things that God wants, we could say, okay, it's not going to defeat me, but look, God's plan's not winning, right? God's losing. You know, and you could have said the same thing. Look, all the people of God are taken away. They're worshiping this image. They're over here, and this isn't right, and this nation's going away. God's got to be losing. Same thing happened in the New Testament. A guy named Stephen, he starts preaching and preaching and preaching, and then they kill him. They stone him. They throw him in a pit, and they hurl stones in him. And you think, man, the church started in a very good way, and it didn't take very many chapters, and one of their best preachers is killed. It looks like loss. The same thing in the Old Testament. It looked like loss when they're taken to that land, and they're forced to worship something they don't want to worship. Well, in that moment, was Stephen defeated? Was the plan of God defeated? Was the scoreboard now in a deficit on God's side? Did he lose? No. Stephen dies? Yes, he dies, but what happens is the church actually spreads. It says after Stephen was stoned, the church actually spread out because they were afraid of the persecution. They spread out and they started preaching the gospel. So the reason the church grew is because of Stephen's persecution. And there was a guy there by the name of Saul. And Saul was there looking and watching Stephen be stoned. And the last thing that Stephen said before he died was, God, would you forgive them? And that prayer was answered because one day Saul would become Paul. And he would be forgiven. That prayer that Stephen prayed was answered right there in the conversion of Saul. And Paul wrote majority of the New Testament we have. So even when it looks like we're down, right? We're in the 9th inning, we're down by 8, and we're in the wrong stadium, and everything looks like it's a loss, God's plan never loses. So yes, is it awkward? 100% it's awkward because we're different. But we can't let that defeat us, and we can't let that defeat our view of God's mission. God's never, ever going to lose.